Oh, Greetings and welcome to Thursday night virtual bar night. How you doing out there, folks? Welcome to another edition of Marcus Era Lessons from the Cockpit virtual bar night. Tonight, I want to do something a little different, okay? What I want to do is just answer questions. If you guys have some questions you want to ask me about various things, then please chime in. Put the questions down here in the chat. And if I can answer them, if I know the answer, I'll answer them. If there's some classification things that go on, depending on the situation, I may have to be a little vague. All right. But I'll tell you if I don't know the answer. All right. And realize we're starting a little late tonight. Okay. I've been messing with the router. I've got it right here on the floor next to me and have rebooted it to make sure that we don't have any trouble tonight with our connection over YouTube. So, and man, there's a lot going on. One thing I'm noticing, and maybe it's just because they are putting it in the news more, okay? But there's been a lot of airplane incidents lately where there's been engine fires, the crash of the Black Hawk and the CRJ, a lot of crazy things happening in the world of aviation. And, I don't know why that is. I feel it's partly because we are relying too much. You're all welcome. I feel that maybe we rely too much on the technology. And some of our mission planning skills may have deteriorated. And I mentioned the other night that almost every mission, even local missions, I was drawing my own operational navigation chart and would put it in the folder with all the rest of the mission paperwork. And you have to understand, there's a lot of mission paperwork. There's the aircraft forms, which is called a 781, where you write down, who was on the airplane, the last four of their social security number, how you divide the flying time, who was getting instructor time, night time, how many approaches, how many landings, all those kinds of things went on this one piece of paper called a 781 that also went in the forms and went to flight records. And that's how they kept track of your flying time, your landings, takeoffs, all those kinds of things. Pretty much every quarter is when our training beans would flip over, meaning new quarter, clean slate. You have to have 12-day landings, 6-night landings, like 16 approaches during the day, visual pattern stuff, all the way to heavy aircraft like C5, autopilot off air refueling. And believe me, autopilot off air refueling with a C5 was challenging. All right. But I told you, 3 dits of trim, 1, 2, 3 for every 10 feet. And the airplane was pretty trimmed out by the time it got underneath you. Okay. And we had a lot of those training things that we had to mark off every quarter to stay current. And I hope that the training has not suffered because of the number of pilots that are required right now, both in the military and the commercial world. What I don't want to see or hear about is we have changed the length of training, the intensity of training, just because we need to get people through the pipeline. Because that is a Class A disaster waiting to happen. And folks, I know people that have, I've mentioned once already. Yui, how you doing? Great to see you again too, Yui. I have talked to several friends of mine who have flown and operated with. Glad you're doing great, brother. Thanks for joining. Who have flown with how do you say this? Substandard pilots. And thanks. I'll explain the Hawaiian shirt here in a little bit. A very dear friend of mine interviewed a gentleman that had military time, had his airline transport pilot rating, and did not recommend him for hire to a major carrier. And as a matter of fact, this guy kind of got a little combative with him. And he put in his folder, do not hire for these reasons. Do not hire this gentleman for these reasons. And they were all valid reasons. Very valid reasons. He gave him an oral evaluation flying from a typical city that this carrier went to another typical city that they would land at. And he couldn't get through the oral evaluation. And not just little errors, but like major errors for somebody that should know better and had their ATP. And so he put in there, do not hire this guy because he is an accident waiting for some cause to happen. And unfortunately, I hired him anyway. And after a number of people flew with him, they said to my buddy, you're right. We probably shouldn't have hired this guy. And I honestly don't know to this day if that individual is still flying. And believe me, I don't want to scare you into thinking, oh, there's all kinds of these guys and gals running around, right? I firmly believe something one of my ROTC instructors told me when I was going through college. Everyone has heard time heal all wounds. But this very, very great major who was a great mentor told me, yes, time heals all wounds, but time also wounds all heals, which I thought was a great come to that. Welcome back, Wayne. How you doing, brother? Bomber Moon coming up tonight. Wayne, I have not heard that word and that phrase in a very, very long time. Thank you Thank you, brother, for bringing that up. A bomber moon. Mark, thanks for joining us. Okay. Story behind the Hawaiian shirt. I've got two of these actually. I don't know if you can see all of the details, but hang on, let me. Everything's backwards here. Oh, that doesn't have it on it. All right. Okay. Notice, sorry, everything's backwards. Notice it has ZZ on the tail. Okay. And it has the tiger stripe on the tail here, up here. Okay. There's a better look at them. All right. I was stationed at Kadena, as Yui mentions down here, in the 909th Air Refueling Squadron. Absolutely the best flying assignment I had. And about 3 years ago, my squadron commander said, "You're not going to believe what I found." And what? He says, "I found a place that does Hawaiian shirts, two of them, one in orange, one in black, KC 135s. Guess what's on the tail? ZZ and the tiger tail." And of course, I said, "What's the website?" And bought two of them. And Wayne, I hope that gets fixed, man. We'd love to have you back with us. And this is the orange one, and I love this one. Okay, and I was wearing it out tonight, and of course, a lot of people think, "Hey, that's really a cool shirt." But as I mentioned in my last bar night, my wife and my son have figured out a way to make these and customize them using my airplane drawings, my wall pilot drawings. And remember, folks, I have 780 potential aircraft, to include helicopters, even old helicopters, that we can put on shirts. Right now, we've got an A7 shirt from the Blue Hawks VA-72. Obviously, the 909th, okay, that has, my airplane you see here above me, 8874 on it. We have the Young Tiger Task Force, which was the tanker task force at Kadena during the Vietnam War. And then we did a special one for the Candy Bomber Foundation that has the C-54 and parachutes on it. And then across the bottom hem is the Berlin skyline, which was pretty cool. Okay. Supreme Eater, welcome back. Great to have you guys. As I mentioned at the top of this, folks, I want you to run the show tonight. This is your opportunity to ask me questions. And understand that I have a lot of operational tactical experience, not just in the tankers, but in other airplanes too, F-15s, even S-3 Viking time. A lot of experience in the joint world, working with the Navy and the Marine Corps, working with carrier battle groups. I showed you my 5-inch shell from a destroyer the other night. My master's degree is in air warfare. My master's degree is military history, / air warfare. I studied air warfare from Thaddeus Lowe and balloons during the Civil War all the way up to 5th generation fighters and how to employ them. I had classes on everything from the air war in the Pacific during World War II, which was taught by a guy that flew P-38s and P-51s, and I think P-40s too, to the role of fighter aircraft in combat, taught by a guy that flew F-100s and A-7s during the Vietnam War. Mr. Lonnie Berry's in the house. It's great to have you here, Lonnie. Jason, welcome back, brother. You're not late because I started late. Okay, Jason. So I've only been on since about 20 minutes ago. I started late tonight. I wanted to make sure that there's no hiccups in the connection with the Wi-Fi. So I've got the router here below me, down here off my elbow, and actually reset it. So hopefully there won't be any problems tonight. If things get, fuzzy or, the video goes away, please let me know immediately. Okay. So folks, it's your turn. Ask me. Wayne, you're not going to believe this. Most of you are not going to believe this. I don't do flight sims on a PC. Never have. Oh, no, I take that back. I did when I was a major and had the whole stick and throttle thing, everything hooked up. But Wayne, seriously, I haven't done PC. Now, Wayne, I will tell you, a lot of people have said, Mark, you need to start doing DCS. And I thought to myself, it would be fun to do that. And I've seen some pretty elaborate simulators in my time, but nothing like I saw when I was in Iowa working for Rockwell Collins. There was a gentleman that worked for Rockwell Collins when I was there. His name is Matt Wheatless-Bach. Matt Wheatless-Bach is a legend in the simulator community for two reasons. He has a no fooling 747-200 cockpit in his garage that he had cut out of an ex-Singapore airline 747 at Mojave, moved it to his house and completely rewired it. And I think, if I remember right, there's 6 screens, big monitors around it, so that you've got pretty much full view. Okay. Before he bought that, though, he has the only fighter simulator, full up fighter sim in his basement. It ran off the Microsoft flight 4.0, whatever. And my family hadn't joined me in Iowa yet. And there would be days, Saturdays, when we weren't working, where I'd go over and fly that thing for 6 hours. And it seemed like 3 minutes. I'd go to Tehran, I'd go to Pyongyang, I'd go to Beijing, all these places that I wasn't allowed to go when I was in the military. And of course, the graphics for these things actually portrayed it quite well. And the aircraft that he used for the fighter sim was actually an F-18 Super Hornet. So, yeah, pretty wild. All right. The really cool thing about his, I think it was Flight Sim 2 or Flight Sim 3, and his simulator was there was an aircraft carrier just west of the Golden Gate Bridge. And he said, Mark, I've had people sit in this thing and try to land on that aircraft carrier. And I said to Matt, would you like to see how it's done? He goes, dude, if you can pull it off, I'd love to see it. And I said, oh, I'm going to more than pull it off. I'm going to do it numerous times. And he goes, sure you are. And I said, no, Matt, watch this. Okay, Matt, I will land on that aircraft carrier just like they normally do on a real carrier. I'll show you how it's done. And he said, okay, where do you want me to put you? And I said, I want you to put me 3 miles behind the fantail of the carrier, about a half mile to the right at 800 feet. He goes, okay, here we go. Hey, Supreme Eater, I'll get to your question here in just a minute about bailing out of 135s. And because I had been on so many aircraft carriers and had actually flown F-14D simulator and in an S-3 Viking, I knew how to do it. Again, I'm in a Super Hornet, so I'm about 500 knots coming down 800 feet off the water, about a quarter to a half mile offset to the right of the aircraft carrier. I go into a very hard brake, beam the nose numbers of the carrier, and slow down. Don't put out any speed brakes. All right. But once we get, below the speeds, gear down. And of course, you slow down more. Flaps down, you slow down more. And then you catch the power. And then when you're about 30 degrees, 45 degrees off the fantail, you roll in. And you roll in so that you're about a half mile and about 150 feet. But you have to remember, the carrier is moving this way. The landing area is this way, 4 or 7 degrees off of the heading of the ship. So you're constantly kind of doing this like right jink kind of thing, okay? Tor Chaser, thank you. Welcome. It's the first time I've seen your name up here. I really appreciate that. And I came in very first time in Matt Wheatless Box Sim in a Super Hornet, gear down, flaps down, hook down, got the number 3 wire first time. He couldn't believe it. And I said, Rogers Ranger, welcome back. And yeah, Rogers Ranger kind of crabbing to the right a little bit, okay? Because again, ship's moving this way, but the landing area is this way, so you kind of have to go like this a little bit. But I pulled it off. All right, landed first time. He was shocked. I said, well, why are you so shocked? He says, well, first of all, you're a tanker guy. How does a tanker guy know how to land on an aircraft carrier? And I said, I spend a lot of time at Oceana in the F-14D sim with a guy who was an instructor, Rio, in the RAG, and he taught me how to do it. I said, I've got 3 sessions, 3 hours each, 9 hours in the F-14D sim. In the last hour, he would always help me fine tune, how to approach the ship, so that in the 9th hour of my simulator journey with my good friend, Wimbo, I was doing it at night with the ship doing its thing. Okay. And folks, you have to remember, in the airplane, you have roll, pitch, yaw. When you're landing on an aircraft carrier, you have roll, the ship's rolling, pitching, yawing, heaving, and swaying. So you have 5 things that you got to kind of collect in your brain. And believe me, Wimbo didn't have this doing it very much. He goes, I've lightened the load on this a little bit, but here you go. Here's the things that you have to deal with. All right. roll, pitch, yaw, heave, and sway. Because it's like a cork in the ocean. It does all that because of wave action. I hit the deck pretty hard. Okay. We were down, but it was ugly. But he says, hey, we're down. And believe it, I think the lurching, K. Roberts, is the heaving and swaying. But we got down, okay? And yeah, crazy, okay? And then he had me do it in the weather. Not rolling, pitch, and yaw, and, a pretty clean sea. And then he had me do it, come out of the weather, where you're basically doing an ILS down to, a couple hundred feet and half mile behind the ship, 3/4 of a mile behind the ship. No, excuse me, 200 a mile. That's what it was. And man, that's scary. When you come out of the clouds and there's the ship, and of course you're seeing part of it as you're coming down, and all of a sudden, boom, there it is. And you've got just seconds to react and put yourself where you need to be. Oh, you know what? That's a video I need to put up. I have VF-31 Tomcatters, F-14 crews when they were out for 10 months on the Lincoln. And I don't know if you remember, about March 26th of 2003, there was one of those massive, massive windstorm shamals that went through. And they had to land airplanes on the carrier in that. And it's the plat camera, both in the deck and the one that they have up in the conning tower that's recording every landing. And I'm telling you, it's scary. A couple of the Hornets have to go around. A couple of the Tomcats, they're not landing on center line, but they land. One lands, I mean, just spot on where he's supposed to. 3-wire. The landing stripe splits the nose wheels, because that's where the camera is. I mean, pretty crazy. Okay. So because I understood from flying the F-14 DSIM, I learned a lot about landing on the aircraft carrier. Surprised Matt Wheatless-Bach, which was funny. But my last assignment in the Air Force was at Operational Test and Evaluation Center. And one of my programs was the AIM-9X missile, Block 2. AIM-9X Block 2. Well, the Navy owns the Sidewinder program. So we had meetings up at Norfolk, and I told the Navy program manager, hey, can you get me some F-18 Super Hornet sim time so I can go shoot some of these things and just kind of play around with them a little bit? He goes, oh, yeah, man, we can do that easily. I just need to get all of your security clearances and everything and get them on file there. And I told him, I said, Biscuit, believe it or not, they're already there. And he goes, what? I said, I used to fly the Tomcat simulator with Wimbo. And of course, he looked it up and he goes, sure enough, you're in the system. So come on down. So I got to fly an F-18 Super Hornet full up, with my TS clearance, and do pretty much all the things that it could do. And you know what? I came in and I landed. There was an instructor and 2 new students that were going through VFA 106, which is the replacement air group squadron for the Super Hornet. And I landed, took a 3-wire, and again, I got out. They say, tanker guy. How does a tanker guy know how to land on an aircraft carrier? And of course, I looked at him and I said, well, I'm just that good. He goes, no, you're not. And I said, I spent a lot of time in the F-14 sim before it went away. So, oh man, if any of you have seen Commander Fravor's interview with Joe Rogan, whew, good stuff. Okay. Supreme Eater, you asked about parachuting out of a KC-135. Great question. I'm going to give you some details here first. All right. In the nose wheel compartment, not the nose wheel compartment, it's just forward of the nose wheel. Okay. There's a hatch on a KC-135 that's about that square. Okay. And you can see some of the electronics, the cables for the yoke, all those kinds of things are all right there. And we look up in there, look at all that stuff, and there's a bottle that has 2,000 pounds of pressure in it. And that bottle is made for the entry crew door. And what that does is if we have to get out of the plane, there's a switch that we can push that bottle basically activates and cuts the door off the airplane. And the hatch just falls off. Okay. There is a bar that comes down. Next time you're at an air show, you'll see this bar above the crew entry chute that comes down. And once you get your parachute on, that's the bar you hang on, let go of, and you drop out of the chute. Now, obviously, you do that with the airplane as slow as you can, but you also have to have the gear up. There's a warning in there. If you exit the airplane from the crew entry chute, the gear has to be up because, first of all, the inboard gear doors are down, the wheels are down, gear is down, and you're going to hit one of them. You will hit one of them. So they said you had to jump out of a clean airplane. In other words, gear up, flaps up. On the KC-135, there's a small flap we call a filler flap right behind the gear. And that's why you had to have the flaps up. I think you could have them down to 20 degrees, but that was the most, because that little flap is also hanging down and you might hit that on the way out. When I was flying the airplane, we had 4 parachutes in the back, one for each of us: pilot, co-pilot, navigator, and boom operator. If you had another crew on the airplane, well, it's whoever got to the parachutes first. There is no longer those parachutes in the back of the jet. They've taken them off. In the history of the airplane, as far as I know, there has only been one crew that has jumped out of a KC-135, and it was during a test at Edwards Air Force Base. And the co-pilot, navigator, boom operator went. The pilot did not. And believe it or not, got control of the airplane and was able to land it. I can't remember what the problem was with the airplane. I can't remember why they had to jump out, but they jumped out of the plane. And everything worked just like it was supposed to. Parachute on, cut the door off, hang from the bar, let go of the bar, go out into the wind stream. Okay. 1 potato, 2 potato, 3 potato, 4, pull the D-ring, or at 2,000 feet, if you can determine that, float down and you're good. In this particular instance, the 3 crew members, as far as I remember, jumped out and parachuted safely onto the dry lake bed. The pilot somehow was able to get control of the airplane and actually landed it. Because you have to remember, the lake bed runway is like 2 miles long. I mean, it's really a long runway. There has been one other crew that thought we need to jump, but then decided against it. They were able to get the main gear down, but not the nose gear. And so they were thinking, well, do we jump out of the airplane? What do we do? They decided to stay with the airplane. They tried like 36 times to manually lower the nose wheel, and it wouldn't come down, would not unlock. During the investigation, what happened was they found out that the cable that connected it's on the floor in the cockpit. It's like a latch that you pull. If you ever go in the cockpit of the KC-135, there's this like red latch next to what used to be the boom operator's seat on the left side of the airplane. And you pull that thing up, and it's supposed to manually unlock the nose gear and have it fall down into the airstream, and that's what locks it into place. That cable had snapped, and was the reason why the locking mechanism for the nose gear stayed in the lock position even when they tried to hydraulically lower the nose gear and manually lower the nose gear. It wasn't coming down, and they tried it over and over and over again. Didn't work. So they decided, okay, we're going to land the plane. And they kept the nose off for quite a while. And this was an airplane, I think it was stationed at McConnell, and they basically flew all the way to California to do this and set the airplane down on the lake bed runway, and finally waited until they couldn't hold the nose off anymore. Nose came down and skidded to a stop. There's one other instance where they had a complete gear failure where the strut basically came out of the main strut. The oleo strut literally was just dangling. And of course, now that gear's down, you're not jumping out. And all the other gear were down. They decided, okay, we're going to land again on the dry lake bed. And the airplane basically skidded to a stop on the lake bed with the left outboard engine getting a lot of damage because it was skidding across the lake bed. But literally the only thing that kept the wheel truck attached to the main strut was the gear scissors, the shimmy scissors. That was the only thing that kept that assembly on the airplane. And when they landed the airplane, of course, that thing bottomed out and caused some other problems. But they were down. Okay. So only one instance that I know of where somebody has parachuted out of a KC-135. The pilot said, you know what, I'm going to keep trying, and was able to bring the airplane back. And after I left the Air Force is when they decided, you know, these parachutes just hang back here. Nobody's used them except for this one instance. Maybe we should take them off. And now those parachutes are no longer part of the equipment list on the airplane. Okay. Let me go back up here real quick. Somebody had another question. Yeah. If there's more people than the 4 parachutes, you know, I had many boom operators tell me, I'm just going to beat you over there with the crash axe and take yours. But again, you know what? It's only been that one time that I know of where somebody's had to parachute out. And of course, in the emergency procedures, you know, it talked about if you have to jump out of the airplane, you know, here's the warnings. The biggest one being you can't have the main gear down because you'll strike it on the way back. But the 3 people that jumped out made it, flew again another day. Pilot got the airplane under control and landed it. So that's kind of a long answer to your question, but those are the procedures for parachuting out of a KC-135, which you cannot do anymore because there's no more parachutes in the plane. They're hanging in the back, and They're no longer there. And they were the old 1960s parachutes, okay? They were heavy. They were big and they were heavy. I did fly in one airplane that had 6 of them, though, one day. 6 parachutes in the back. I thought, why is this airplane different? And that particular crew chief said, hey, we always fly with more people on board. I put 2 more in the back, and I've got it in the forums. Okay. All right. Carlo, welcome. All right. Other questions? Let me go back and see if there's any more up here. Kay Roberts talking about the Manpad Stinger simulator. A little quick story about that. That was part of our syllabus at the KC-135 Weapons School. We would go down to El Paso. What's the Army base down there in El Paso? Help me out here, guys. Thank you. Thank you, Ranger. Bliss, Fort Bliss. Fort Bliss is where the Missile and Space Intelligence Center is for the Army, okay? And the most dangerous phases of flight for the KC-135 are takeoff and landing. When the airplane is very heavy, taking off, a lot of gas in it, not maneuverable, slow, and those big CFM56s going, all right? And of course, I mentioned probably 2 weeks ago, now they've got the laser countermeasure system on the airplane, and most of the airplanes have them. When I was flying the airplane, didn't have that. So we had to come up with other means of dealing with that. So what we would do is all of our students would go to Bliss and they would get in the Stinger simulator and they would see how easy it was to basically find, fix, and finish a KC-135. Our engines burn very hot. We're easy to track. And so all of the weapons school undergraduates, we call them WUGs, that went through this course, got in that simulator and actually got to fire not only the Stinger, but the SA-7, the 16, the 18, and Wayne and Ranger, help me out here, 22, SA-22, which are all man-portable SAMs. From there, the next day, we would go to Roswell, New Mexico, which used to be a Strategic Air Command base. And one crew would fly threat avoidance arrivals and departures and plan it all out. And one crew would be with the Army Bubbas working the SA-7, SA-18, 16, and 18 Manpad. It wasn't simulators. It was like, it's got the seeker head in it, but it's basically, here's the shoulder fired SAM. Just to see, okay, did the tactics work? And then the next day, the crews would switch so that the crew that wasn't flying is now in the jet doing their thing, and the crew that was in the jet is now on the ground finding, fixing, tracking the 135. Now, these things, these Manpads have proliferated like crazy. There's a lot of news out there that Ambassador Stevens was trying to head off Stingers that were being sold to some folks at ISIS. So you can imagine some bad guy set up off the end of Hartsfield International in Atlanta, because you can't police the whole area. You can't have people, everywhere looking for these folks. And I'm telling you, it's a real threat. Okay. A very determined enemy that gets a hold of those things could come in the United States and get real nasty with these things. Okay. They're not going to do it at military bases. I can tell you that, particularly fighter bases. Most of the military planes have these laser countermeasure systems on them now. I don't know if all the KC-135s do. All the 46s do off the assembly line. C-130s have them. C-17s have them. I believe C-5s have LRCM also, or a LRCM-like system. Not a 777. Not an A340. And that's one of the things that bother me about Manpads. I'll tell you something. Here's something really fascinating, okay? Air Mobility Command's Warfare Center would go to bases, tanker bases, C-17 bases, whatever. The Air Mobility Warfare Center would go there, and they had an SA-7 in a case. And it was the same case that they normally would carry the thing in, okay? And it was all broken down. The tubes, the grip, everything. And as you know, maybe you don't know, you can assemble the whole missile and the tube very quickly, load it very quickly. Okay. A good team could do it under a minute. Anyway, the Air Mobility Warfare Center had this simulator. And I believe in the case they had 3 batteries, which is the big, large ball that was on the end. The seeker, all right, that was on just a long tube. The long tube had the battery and the electronics in it. And they'd go to the bases and let people play with it. This gentleman that was the subject matter expert for these Manpads said for 3 years, he traveled commercially with that as part of his baggage. There was only one place that stopped him and goes, "What is that?" One place. Guess where it was? Des Moines, Iowa. Why the heck Des Moines, Iowa? He still doesn't know to this day. But some guy that was in security there said, "Would you mind opening that box?" And the gentleman goes, okay. And obviously this is well before 9/11. And he opened it, and the guy looks at it and goes, "What is that?" He said, "It's a missile simulator." And the guy goes, "What?" And of course, he had a authorization letter that he took with him that was stamped by whatever version of Homeland Security we had back then for him to take it through the airport. But you can imagine it raised a lot of eyebrows. But what raised even more eyebrows was they went through LAX, they went through San Francisco, they went through Seattle, they went through Chicago, they went through Atlanta, they went through Miami. They took that SA-7 simulator, and a lot of major airports didn't get stopped once until they got to Des Moines, Iowa. And some very curious person asked, "Open that box." And of course, what do you got here? Oh, too funny. Yeah, I didn't want the crop dusters. Okay. Mormons. Ranger, we're talking about Mormons? Yeah, they had a permit for it, Wayne. And of course, they pulled that out. Okay. But still, they pull the authorization out. They pull out their military IDs and they show, "Hey, this is what we do. We go around to bases and we talk about defensive tactics against these things and all that stuff." But the people in Des Moines are like going, "You have what in this box?" I just thought that was funny. Random hero. You've never, and this is a story back from probably, the late 90s, I think, somewhere around there. All right. But yeah, this guy told me, because the only place I've ever been stopped is Des Moines, Iowa. And we had to pull the thing out, open the box up, pull the thing out, show them the authorization letter, show them that we're in the military before they'd let them go. And they always checked it as check bags. They were never ever going to put that thing inside the airplane with them. They knew that was pushing things too much. All right, it was a check bag. But I'll tell you something. When I deployed from my second deployment to Saudi Arabia in 2002, which was the run up to the Shock and Awe campaign the following year, we have what's called the rotator. And I don't know if any of you have heard of this term or whatever, but basically it's an airliner that is contracted that flies the military to certain locations. And this particular rotator flies Baltimore to Ramstein, Frankfurt to Prince Sultan. And I remember this was in August of 2002 when I went back to be the chief of the air fueling control team for what was called Southern Focus. Operation Southern Watch turned into Southern Focus because General Mosley, being the brilliant man that he was, said, hey, we might as well start prepping the battlefield now if we can. If they shoot at us, then we're going to start taking out some nasty targets, which we did. I saw Strike Eagles drop 10 GBU-10 2,000-pound bombs on Talil, different things at Talil one day. Massive, massive destruction. And one Iraqi in a Chevy Tahoe driving around on the ramp slowly, watching all the bombs hit the Air Operations Center and the basically command center at Talil. Back to the story. A lot of Army guys were getting on the rotator, and they had very long boxes. And I just happened to be behind one of these young sergeants. And I asked him, I said, what's in the box? He says, my Barrett's Light 50. Say that again? Yeah, my Barrett's. No ammunition. We're not allowed to bring ammunition, but that's the gun that's in there. It's my sniper rifle. It's my rifle of choice. And he was an Army military police guy. All right. A couple of guys had their dogs, their working dogs with them, and brought them on the plane. The dog slept almost through the whole, both flights, the flight to Germany and the flight to Prince Sultan. But that's the only time, folks, I've ever seen somebody get on a plane with, a full up freaking weapon. Just crazy. Anyway. All right, let's go back here a little bit. Ranger, why are you talking about Mormons? Just busting your chops, brother. Not a Pan Am 747. It was a Delta 777. Very comfortable ride. And you know what? The cool thing was, because I was a lieutenant colonel, I got to sit in front. I got to sit in first class. And sitting in first class as a lieutenant colonel, yeah, okay. All of you know rank has its privileges, okay? And we were God bless this crew. God bless this crew. The crew that took us over there treated us all like kings. To the youngest airman, I think I was the highest ranking guy in the jet. Treat us all like kings. I was fortunate enough to be lieutenant colonel at the time and sit like in seat 4F on the right-hand side of the plane, window seat on the right-hand side of the plane. And the flight attendants couldn't have been more gracious, more helpful, more loving than any other flight I'd been on until I left Shaw Air Force Base on a United 777. Again, sitting in like seat 1F in first class. You know, I was going out to the jet and I'm kind of running out to the jet and everybody's like, Sluggo, why are you in such a hurry to get on the jet? I said, because they haven't reconfigured this thing. It still has first class and business class. And they were, oh. So, yeah, I got like seat 1F. No, I was back about 2 rows, maybe seat 3F. Okay. Michelle, welcome. Burnshot, welcome. Good afternoon, Burnshot. I'd love to know where you're at. That United crew that took me to Prince Sultan in January of 2003, knowing that we were getting ready to go into Iraq, was again another extremely professional crew that treated us all like kings and queens. Took our numbers, took our emails, and would say, if your family needs anything, do not hesitate to contact us. The pilots, because there was 2 legs to this journey, there was basically 2 crews on board. Okay. And as you know, the 777 has like a crew bunk area. And we flew over through the night, took off out of Shaw in just a driving rainstorm. I mean, just incredible rainstorm. And it got worse as we were taking off. I mean, the airplane was just wet. And of course, as soon as there was lift under the wings, it had big, huge fog, or not fog, contrails and everything, and vapor coming off the wings. But that crew was absolutely fabulous. We got to Alexandria, Egypt, and I knew that if they were going into Saudi Arabia, they would turn over Luxor. Luxor, Egypt has a great big navigation aid there that you turn east to go into Saudi airspace. And of course, at Luxor is, you know, the Sphinx and the Great Pyramids and all those kinds of things. Or no, excuse me, you know, the Luxor temple and all that kind of stuff, which you could see. We were at 34,000 feet and you could see it all. A beautiful, clear day. And the crew obviously said, if you guys want to go in the cockpit, fine. You know, if we can't trust you guys, we can't trust anybody. And besides, we had Barrett's Light 50s under this thing too. But I'll never forget that flight. That crew just took great care of us, you know, loved us like we were their own kids. Got to go in the cockpit, do all kinds of fun stuff, talk to the pilots. You know, they gave me a headset so that I could kind of listen to the ATC. You know, told them who I was. You know, I'm a KC-135 guy. You know, just absolutely great people. So flying into Prince Sultan, we had to close all the windows and all that kind of stuff. We landed during the middle of the day though, so it wasn't a big deal. And that was the second year I left my wife on her birthday to deploy. 2002, I left on her birthday. 2003, I left on her birthday. Some of the sacrifices we make for our families in the military. Okay. Let's see what else we got. I wonder whatever happened to the steward's shoulder patch walls. Troops who pass through the rotator terminals. You know, that's Kay Roberts. That's a great question. I was back in Baltimore not too long ago, and I went to the USO there, which is absolutely fabulous. They're not manned the same way they used to, though. They don't have the same staffing, and so at 9 or 10 o'clock, you can't stay inside anymore, which I found amazing. All right. I've stayed in the USO in Chicago in one of their big lounge chairs with my son coming back from a trip. We went to the Reno air races, and we went from Reno to Chicago, Chicago to Iowa. And I don't know what it is about O'Hare, but I hated going through O'Hare, and I tried to avoid it at all costs, because every time I went through O'Hare, something weird happened and we got stuck. And my son's like going, "What are we going to do, Dad? What are we going to do, Dad?" All right. And of course, around the airport, you're paying like $300 a night for a hotel. And we stayed in the USO in these beautiful lounge chairs, binge watching all of the what are they? God, my mind just went blank. We're just binge watching all of the Desolation of Smog, all that genre, that series. Okay, I can't remember what it's called. You guys, I'm sure, know what it's called. Anyway, Carlo, thank you for that. Yeah, we make a lot of sacrifices. But the USOs, folks, do a great, great service to troops, particularly those that are. I've seen a wife with 3 kids crying in an airport. Matter of fact, I think it was O'Hare. Crying in the airport with her 3 kids. Husband's deployed. She's trying to get back to her parents while dad's deployed. She's sitting there crying. Okay. And I said, "Ma'am, what do you need help with?" Because you can tell most of the time if a family is a military family. And she says, "Me and my 3 kids are stuck here overnight. I don't know what to do." And I said, "I know what to do. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Serra, and I know exactly where you need to go. Do you know about the USO?" And she goes, "Never heard of it." I said, "Come with me." And the Chicago USO, folks, is a great place if you're stuck. Terrible airport to go through, but a great place if you get stuck. And I took this mother and her 3 young kids, took her up there. I said, "All you got to do is show your ID." And I said, "There's diapers, food, drinks. There's even a nursery and a place for you to stay overnight. That won't cost you a thing." And, of course, I asked her, "Do you have any money on you?" And she says, "Not a lot." And I made sure, because again, I'm a lieutenant colonel, that she wouldn't have to worry about money. I'm just going to say that. All right. Got her set up in there. And of course, she got the baby in one of the cribs, got the 2 kids down, and it was a bunk bed, but I think she put the 2 older kids, next to each other on the bottom bunk. And there was a really nice, comfortable lounge chair in there. And I said, "You're set." And she couldn't thank me enough the next morning. And I said, "Okay, when's your flight? Let's get you set up, get you where you need to go." And I was traveling by myself at the time. And I'll tell you the purpose of me telling this story here in just a few minutes, but her flight was before mine. So, and I just had a backpack and a carry-on. And I said, "Let's get you where you need to go." And I got to the gate, told the gate agent, her husband's deployed. She's going to her mom's. Please take care of her. And I can't remember what airline it was, but the gate agent says, sir, she'll be the first one on the jet. Okay. I'll make sure that she's the first one on the jet and that she's where she needs to be and set up. I said, thanks. And said, okay, bye. She thanked me again. What can I do for you? Nothing. Go home. Enjoy being with your mom and dad while your husband's deployed. And off we went. Off I went. Off she went. The reason I tell you that story, folks, is because I want all of you to understand, have their back. Many of us have been through airports numerous times where we've had a mom and kids going by themselves somewhere without dad. The mom's bawling, the kids are bawling. You can pretty much tell when it's a military family. And we have your back. It's our job to take care of each other, whether you're military or not military. Play it forward. Have their back. And take care of people. All right. I mean, this lady was having an emotional breakdown. All the kids were crying because they saw mom crying. Dad's gone. Didn't know what to do. And the unit that her husband was a part of didn't do her any favors. And if I'd have known the unit, I'd have called back there and says, hey, you didn't take care of this. But hey, I was there. And I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but I'm trying to tell the story. Take care of people around you. All right. Jordan, greetings. How you doing? Michelle, you've been that mom. You know exactly what I'm talking about. And Michelle, hopefully, Michelle, somebody came up to you and said, ma'am, do you need some help? And I'll be honest with you, I've traveled numerous times where I've seen women with young kids. And I said, ma'am, I know you have no idea who I am, but can I help you get the stroller down to the bottom, and help you get settled down there? I would always tell the gate agent what I was doing. Always tell the gate agent when you're doing this. Okay. But most gate agents understand. And I would say, ma'am, I'm not associated with this young lady and her kids. She just needs help. I'm a military member. I just want to help her get down, get settled, and I'll get in my seat. I have never been turned down by a gate agent when I told them that. And so hopefully, Michelle, you had somebody that was able to do that for you. Jordan, watch the rivet joint beat up the pattern today at Whiteman. Must have been fun to do that in such a large plane. Tide. It's so good to see your name up there, brother. Those of you who have not watched my interview with Tide, go watch that. Tide has the distinction of being a Reaper operator from both sides. Started as enlisted, running the sensors, and now flies them. So, Tide, it's good to have you here at Whiteman. Tide, you must have, I would love to hear, Tide, what it was like when all those B-2s came back from Iran. And what the what it felt like to be at Whiteman after something like that. Oh, so you're going through the same thing with new kids. Tide, that's congratulations to you and your wife. All right. 1v1 Rajang. Hopefully I said that right. Thanks for coming by. Seriously. Uh, Tonight, I'm just letting people ask questions. All right. I'm kind of rambling on about some things here. But again, it's one of those nights, and we've been going for about an hour and 10 minutes. Ask me questions. I'm going to stay here for probably another 20 minutes. We'll do that hour and a half tonight. Random Hero, B-29, P-51. I just was at Oshkosh. Incredible. Hopefully you've seen the shorts that I did on the flybys at night. Just crazy. Oh, that's interesting, Ty. They didn't say a whole lot about that. You know, I would have thought, woohoo, people waiting at the end of the runway. Yeah, lay low, pay attention to their surroundings. Yeah, a good point. Fight for the right to party. Random Hero, do you have some air show at Des Moines this weekend? Just curious. So all of you know, I will be attending Tailhook 25, which begins about a week and a half in Reno. I'll be there Wednesday night through Saturday night, and leave to come back home Saturday night. Drive through the night. I say drive through the night. It's about a 6-hour drive from Reno back to Salt Lake City. So if any of you are going to Tailhook, please come find me, okay? Oh, fly-alongs. Man, I would love to go up in a B-29. The B-29s at Oshkosh, they're asking like $1,200. So, yeah, Tide, I bet you there's a lot of new patches showing up with a lot of crazy things on them at Whiteman Air Force Base. Scotty hasn't made me a transporter. Great comeback, Rogers Ranger. All right. Any more questions? Fire away. Let's see. I'm going to be posting a lot more from Oshkosh. I've got some really cool startup video of, you know, a P-51 starting up. And believe it or not, a General Motors FM2 Wildcat, a Corsair, and an Avenger all starting up and taxiing out, which was just crazy. I mean, where do you see that? You know? Oh, yeah, Tide. You're absolutely right. Jordan Outdoors, that mission was a testament of supreme mission planning, maintenance, and tanker support. I heard, I saw something, I think it was on Instagram, where President Trump met with some of the crews, and I guess they gave him a B-2 model. All right. And during the discussion, he talked about the B-2s having F-22s, F-35s out in front of them. And he said, and I think this is the number, 59 tankers that were feeding this group. 59 tankers feeding the package coming over, going into Iran, and coming back out. Whew. Rogers Ranger, 183 to 254, what? Tankers? That seems a little high for a tanker guy. Osprey. All right, let me see if we got anything else up here. Oh, MV-22 airspeed. Okay. Oh, one of the cool things about being at Tailhook this year is there's a gentleman that I interviewed probably more than a year ago. His name is Colonel Fred. Colonel Fred was an Iranian F-4 commander during the 1980s Iran-Iraq War. Colonel Fred has the distinction of flying one of the longest F-4 Phantom airstrikes in the history of warfare, taking off out of Hamadan in northwestern Iran, flying at 300 feet, 340 knots underneath a 747 tanker through the mountains of southeastern Turkey, the Silosat Mountains, turning south at the Turkish-Iran-Iraq border, flying to H3 airfield, tearing it up, and then flying back. I think he said it was like 1,400 miles, but I'll have to check that. Okay. Carlo, Tailhook is the Tailhook Association, which is the 501c3 advocate for naval aviation. And each year they have a huge convention in Reno. Last year was the first time they held it at the Grand Sierra Resort. They used to hold it at the Nugget for 26 years, but they outgrew it. So they had to move to the Grand Sierra Resort Hotel Casino. And it's all things naval aviation. So you have all these naval aviators that come there. And the really cool thing is there's what's called an industry floor, Carlo. And last year, Boeing brought the T-7 simulator. Lockheed had the unclassified F-35 simulator and the T-50 simulator. And there was one other group that did simulation that had like their simulator there also. And I got to fly the F-35 sim for about 30 minutes. And just really cool. Carlo, one of the really, really interesting things about Tailhook Association is they have this big awards luncheon on Saturdays. So Saturday about 11:30, everybody's getting their drinks, sitting down. They have a wonderful meal, and they start giving out awards. Last year, they always ask this question: who's the oldest tailhooker in the audience? Who in this audience has a trap and is the oldest person there? Okay. You're going to love this, Carlo. The oldest tailhooker at last year's Tailhook 2024 convention was 101 years old. And his first trap was in 1943. And he had over 1,000. He was 101 years old and was there at Tailhook, okay? Tide, you've got my email. Just email me and we'll work out the details for that, okay? Tommy, welcome back. Catch you up on an hour and 18 minutes of conversation? Really? I'm just busting your chops, brother. Michelle, I just saw your thing. Helicopters are like women. You trust them and they work, but if you try to understand them, they'll kill you. Can I write that one down, Michelle? Can I use that one? Anyway, the Tailhook Association convention, Carlo, is what I'm talking about. And it's always great to be there. There's a lot of organizations and associations that for naval aviation. The Vietnam River Rat Association is there. They have the Jig Dog luncheon on Friday. They have the awards luncheon on Saturday. And like I said, they asked last year, who's the oldest tail hooker in the audience? And it was a guy 101 years old who had his first trap 1943, his first carrier arrested landing 1943. And if I remember right, it was in the trainer, and I can't remember what trainer they used back then. It may have been a version of the Vindicator or whatever. Okay, thanks, Michelle. That's a really good one. But yeah, it's incredible to be there. And I'm going to take this Iranian F4 pilot and introduce him to all my Navy buds and try and get him in the F-35 simulator, because they have a bombing mission and then they have what they call raid. They have 6 flankers that try and attack a single F-35. The setup, if I remember right, was 50 miles. And it wasn't even close. My first 4 AMRAAMs took out the first 4 guys, 4 flankers, down on the display. The camera system zoomed in on them, and you could see what missiles they had on them, the paint schemes on them, and everything. And so you knew exactly what you're up against. And then the last 2 I used the gun on, and there's not many rounds in the gun on F-35, as many of you know. Ooh, Fort Hunter Liggett. Carlo, you're out in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, might lose signal. Yeah, I can see that. What else? Miles and miles and miles. Yeah. Yeah, Hunter Liggett. Miles and miles and miles of nothing. All right, folks. Any other questions? I'm going to cut us off here, okay? And wait for the last question. Thank you. Thank you, folks, for tuning in tonight. Tide, thanks for being here, brother. And Tide, I told you, the wick will make you a better person and will make you more lethal and will make you more valuable. You're going to gain experience and knowledge, Tide, at the wick. It's going to be a fire hose, Tide. You're going to say to yourself, I can't believe I'm putting myself through this, all this pain, okay? But I'm telling you, Tide, when you get on the other side, you walk across the stage in your mess dress, they give you your graduation certificate, you have that W prefix in front of your MDS, and you're wearing that patch, you are now the expert. And Tide, you'll be a better person for it. It's going to be hard work. It's going to be painful. It's going to be upsetting at times. It's going to be very frustrating at times. The only school that I know of that's better than the WIC, Tide, is test pilot school. Okay? And yeah, give me a call when you get a chance, okay, brother? Particularly before you go to Nellis, if you can, okay? And thanks, Mark, for those words. Andrew, how many miles in total do you think you have flown? Andrew, that's a great question. And you know what, Andrew? I have no freaking idea. I guess I could go back and look at my flight records, total up the time, I guess, okay? Millions of miles, tens of millions of miles, at least. Particularly, Andrew, when I was in the Pacific, okay? We'd fly 3 hours down to Guam, do pattern work, do air refueling, and then fly 3 hours back to Kadena and Okinawa. All right. Those were long days, okay? 8-hour missions. 3 down, 3 back, 2 hours messing around down in Guam. So I don't know how many miles. Anyway, back to what I was saying. Thanks all of you for joining me tonight. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your support for not only these lives, but my channel. I realize I have not posted a lot lately. That was because I was at Oshkosh for 8 days, and I'd get home. We'd get up at 6 o'clock, be on the airfield by 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and we'd stay until 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night. My feet were killing me when I got home. But I've got a lot of great stories and a lot of great footage that I'll be sharing along the line here. Okay. Uncle Willard, thanks for being here. But next Tuesday, I'll be back. Okay. And who knows what's going to happen during that time period. A lot of crazy things going on in aviation. Please come join my All Ranks Club. 2 of you are already there. Jason and I have already had a one-on-one session. Really enjoyed that, Jason. It was a lot of fun. And like I say, if you join at the designated driver or by the bar, you get stickers, one-on-one with me, Q&A time with me. And lately, that's all been individual, where it was just Jason and I on a Zoom. So, and I think that starts at $15 a month. All of you have my email address. Let me put it in here one more time. If you want books, Tide, if you want them, you've got my email. That's how you contact me. $27 covers shipping the book, and the book for $20 for the book, $7 for the shipping. I don't just sign the books. I always put like a personal note in them. Michelle, Jason will vouch for that. Okay. And I think there's one other person on here that has it too. Has my book too. Sold 36 of them while I was at Oshkosh. I was focusing more on the Candy Bomber Foundation. But that's how you get a copy of my book, Tanker Pilot. All right. Great to talk to all of you. Thanks for being here. My son's cooking who knows what downstairs, and it smells great. So I'm out of here. Sluggo, signing off.